Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for this week's live stream and Q&A. Hopefully, you're all having a great Monday so far. We're going to talk about all of the stuff that happened here in Maul Shadow Lord episodes 7 and 8. So make sure you have seen the episodes before watching this. If you haven't, make sure you save this for later. Come back and join us when you have finished the episodes, or if you're finding this on replay, make sure you leave us a comment in the comment section letting us know what you thought of episodes 7 and 8 of Maul Shadow Lord. We're going to get into full spoilers, giving our thoughts on the episode and taking your guys' questions about the episode. Your questions, your comments, anything you'd like to discuss about the episodes tonight that came out last night / this morning. And we're going to predict also kind of leading up to the finale. This is our penultimate episode of our reaction show for Maul Shadow Lord. And so we're going to talk about everything that we thought, all of our theories, things that are going to come up towards the finale, and get hyped as we get closer and closer to May 4th next week. And we get to see what happens at the end of season 1 of Maul Shadow Lord. Make sure if you're watching right now, you hit the like button. Again, it really helps out with the channel. Right now, more people watching than have liked the stream. So make sure you hit that like and help us out and show your support for the channel. If you want to show your support in other ways, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any more of our Maul Shadow Lord content. We do our weekly predictions videos, as well as these live streams, all pertaining to Maul Shadow Lord. Next week will be our last live stream, particularly about Maul Shadow Lord, but we will still be doing our live stream and Q&As up to and through the rest of the year until the next show, which should be Ahsoka Season 2, whenever that gets announced and whenever we get an actual release date for that. We'll also probably be doing a spoiler discussion at some point for The Mandalorian and Grogu. So there's going to be a lot of other fun live streams to have. You subscribe for Star Wars Lads so you can enjoy all of that great content. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also, if you'd like to help out our channel, Patreon or YouTube memberships is another great way. We have many different perks starting from 99 cents on up. Different perks allow you different access to certain things, including priority chat for the live streams, as well as other perks specifically predicated towards the live stream. So make sure you check all of that out, as well as super chat, which can bump up your chat. If there's a big queue tonight, we will answer it instantly, and we will get to all super chats before the end of the stream. So if you want to show your support for the channel that way as well, make sure you look into that. All right, let's get into our thoughts here on Maul Shadow Lord episodes 7 and 8. These were pretty exciting episodes as well. I know personally, I kind of thought these episodes would take a little bit step back, build up towards the finale, but we got quite a bit of action, especially in episode 7, and it really built up both sets of characters as we continue to flesh out these characters and their dynamic, and the resistance between Devon and Maul is still there. He's really still having a hard time getting her to come to his side. And then meanwhile, we also really examined Maul as a character in these last couple episodes, and I really did enjoy that. Maul goes through his own little personal journey, and for those of you who might not have seen the Clone Wars, this was your catch-up episode where it really shows a lot of the things, the traumas this character's had to deal with, and how every time he is knocked back down, he is able to somehow muster the strength, his hatred, his revenge, to get back up and try it again. And he hits kind of rock bottom, at least for this show. He's been lower, but he hits rock bottom for this show at the end of episode 7, beginning of episode 8. And we get to see him kind of push towards whatever's next. We also got the little tease at the end of episode 8 for Crimson Dawn. A lot of us been wondering when that faction is going to come into the story, when we're going to see Maul now associated with them. So a lot of things happened in episodes 7 and 8. So Nick, I'm going to pass it over to you first for your complete thoughts. What did you think of these two episodes? And overall, how did you like these two compared to the rest of the other 6 episodes we have seen so far?
I mean, I think every batch that drops, I get a little bit more enticed, like more seduced by this more mature storytelling that this show has really gone on. I know last week I said this is feels kind of like the Andorification of the Clone Wars animation style and the storytelling being done here. And while I don't necessarily love how this does feel like almost a half step back into that early streaming era of like everything being an extended 3-4 hour film stretched out, and it's not necessarily taking advantage of the episodic structure or the chance of going back to the Clone Wars and Rebels with arcs and all that. It is still very much a fun show that does smartly pay off like a little details here and there, and really does work as nice connective glue to everything else that we've seen in Clone Wars. Uh, Not necessarily Bad Batch yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get some connections there at this point. Obviously, Rebels. Now we're setting up stuff for Solo. Like this is a show that everybody who's been wanting Maul and a version of Maul has been able to get that, right? And I really do appreciate that. This is, I will say, probably the best performance that I think Witwer has had since Star Wars Rebels as Maul. I think that one he can play more into that, like, pure character of the old master, and just like, "I'm weak and feeble, and I'm no longer Darth," all that. Like, that was great, and, I did love what he did in season 7 and season 5 of Clone Wars, obviously, but I always found his performance in Rebels to be such a standout. And this show has been the closest thing, if not the next thing, to really push it, to make me consider, like, "Hey, is that really the best we'll ever see of Maul?" And when we get an episode like we did in episode 8 where he really just, like, stares at himself and goes through his whole history. Yeah, I mean, that was just excellent 'cause there's nothing that he's reacting to in a sound booth, right? He's doing this all on his own. This is all imagination. He can read the script, he can read the lines, he can get direction, but this is all Witwer, and his connection and passion to the character really does come out. At this point, he is kinda like how Ewan McGregor took over for Sir Alec Guinness as everyone's image of Obi-Wan. He is very much taken over the image of Maul, and obviously, there's a lot more that he's done than Ray Park embodying the character, but I don't think, like, even myself, I don't really remember the original actor's name who did the voice dub for Maul and the 2, 3 lines that he had in episode 1 at this point, right? I think it was Peter or something, but it's yeah, it's over for that, like, actor, unfortunately, because of what Whitwer has managed to accomplish here. But as far as the story here, I liked all the beats. I know we had discussed, like, maybe them being split off and maybe Inquisitors hunting them one-on-one, but this is, again, a show that chooses to be competent about everything. The Inquisitors here were really good. Like, I loved seeing Marrok and Crow be so proficient, and Marrok continues to aura farm. He continues to have a very gothic feel to him. Like, he literally does like some Batman poses, standing on towers and stuff. Like, they really know that they have a great, like, mask and design for both of these characters, and they're like, we're gonna make sure that it at least gets its due diligence this time. And yeah, even though the Crow hasn't had nearly as much time because he just appeared in these episodes, it was also still really fun to see them at least have a chance to really be like.
I think we're back, but your webcam is down. I'll cover here while you get that back up and running. Yeah, I mean, my thoughts were very similar. I think these two episodes in general were able to continue with the mature themes that were already set up. And I think one of the ways this show has shown that it is willing to have realistic and maybe a little bit more interesting arcs is through the character of Devon by herself. Like, she is not easily seduced to the dark side, which I like because we all know it's probably going to happen. Maybe they throw us for a loop and it doesn't happen. But we all know at some point she'll probably team up with Maul, even if she doesn't want to become his Sith apprentice. And this most Star Wars shows, most shows that were animated, or shows that might be considered kids shows would just very easily have her succumb to all of the simple things that we've seen in Star Wars. And I feel like this show has not only just taken its time with that arc, but helped us grow attached to the character of Devon and see that she is a strong person on her own. She's not this feeble Padawan who's propped up by Master Doki, and then she's not going to be a feeble Sith if she becomes Maul's Sith apprentice. She's not going to be a feeble Sith apprentice who's propped up by Maul. She actually has convictions and beliefs. And even if she disagrees with both people who are trying to kind of control her destiny, she doesn't necessarily agree with either one. She's able to make her own decisions and follow what she thinks is right and wrong. And I think that's going to make for a far more compelling character in the long run than somebody who just immediately falls into whatever traps Maul has set up for her, whatever mind games he set up for her. So I've really appreciated what they've done with Devon overall. You always see the hints of her anger, you see the hints of her desire to be more, to live out a life that's more full than what Daki has offered her, what the Jedi way has offered her, but also she doesn't just see Maul because he's powerful and say, I want to do that. She has convictions and beliefs on her own. So I like what they've done with Devon. I think she's been one that, even though she hasn't necessarily been the focus of the show, the way I kind of thought we were going to have when we got about halfway point, like I kind of figured Maul would get us into the show. As we get about halfway through, then we start to get more Devon, and then we go back to the two of them together. And while the show has followed that similar plot structure, it hasn't necessarily just made Devon the main character, which I thought it might do. So I appreciate that, and I think they've done a really good job of building up with that. I also really liked seeing Maul here get frustrated with her because there's only so much patience a Sith Lord can have, and he really doesn't hold back on her when she tries to escape again. He's like, "All right, I'm done with this. You either come with me or you don't, but I'm done waiting for you. You are going to do what I want you to do." And I like that. I like the confrontation between the two of them. I like that he's able to present this old master persona that he uses with Ezra later down the line. But in this, he's still challenged with his own inner demons and his own patience. And so I really did appreciate that. I thought the duels here were great. The action in episode 7 really did piggyback nicely off of 6. We got some good duels, some great firefights. All of it was really strong. I liked learning about the Mandalorians a little bit more. Last week we got the tease that they were mercenaries, but seems like some of them are mercenaries, some of them are loyal to Maul, loyal to Rook. They're willing to sacrifice in order to follow the people they respect, their leaders, but a few of them are just pure mercenaries and are going to take the money and run. And they try and then don't make it. But that was, I thought, a very necessary, interesting little tidbit to leave in for the story as well. So that was pretty good. Overall, I liked what they had with Brander in this episode, or these two episodes, as well as Rylee. I mean, all that stuff is pretty good. But the focus for me is still Maul and still Devon, and I thought all of that really hit for these two episodes. They're getting better and better, and I'm excited to see how those two characters play out in these last two. One of the surprises for sure was the tease at the end of episode 6
Mhm.
isn't paid off in episode 7 or 8. We don't know who was being contacted, but we get so many hints of Palpatine in these two episodes, and not just hints, like straight up get to see him in some flashbacks in these two episodes. So that was really cool. I loved seeing some flashbacks to Maul's training, loved seeing the brutality with Palpatine. I think it all gives you a lot of context. It is stuff you've seen or heard about before if you've read the extended material, but seeing it visually and seeing how it impacts Maul. He has one really great scene in this with the reflection of him as a child, and then he looks down and he says, "I hate you," and then it goes away and it shows his own face again, and it just kind of continues to show how Maul looks at himself and why he continues to try to fight to prove to not only Palpatine, not only the people around him, but to himself that he's more than just the starter apprentice for Palpatine. He is in and of himself worthy of being a Sith Lord on his own, and worthy of the plans that Palpatine had and used to entice him about the future when he was young. He's worthy of all that, but it just didn't go right for him, and it was because of Palpatine. And I love that that angle is still here. I think these episodes all but confirmed that Palpatine's gonna be in this show. So maybe not in these next two episodes. He might not show up as like the main villain. I don't think he will in these next two episodes, but he's going to be a part of this show. And I think that's the smartest move because as much as we love Maul and want to see Maul do cool things, Palpatine is the reason he does everything he does. He just wants to prove to Palpatine and beat Palpatine, and I think that's going to make for a really interesting dynamic as he builds up here. I'm starting to think my idea that I pitched last week of this like criminal syndicate war, basically with maybe Black Sun at the heart of the Empire's uh, part of the crime war, and Maul uniting the forces of Crimson Dawn and the Pikes and Mandalorians and all these different groups might actually play out. I think that would be really cool. It would be a really interesting kind of sub conflict within the dark times that you don't necessarily hear about as much, but it could have all of the dark factions of Star Wars involved. And it would be really interesting to see that. So I'm rooting for that to happen one day. But Maul was great in this. I love seeing Savage in a flashback as well. All of it was really, really good. So, two episodes that I would say, like comparatively to episodes 5 and 6, I don't know if I'd say these were better, but they were about the same level for me. I really have enjoyed these last four episodes, especially. But the show as a whole has really paced itself in a way that when you go back and binge watch the rest, or when you go back and do a rewatch of the show, they all feed into each other so nicely that I don't think any of it will have any type of filler or boring episodes. Like everything builds on each other so nicely, and especially in a binge, I think this show is going to get better and better. So hopefully those people who haven't watched it yet continue to discover this show, because I think this is arguably the best constructed animated season Star Wars has ever put out in terms of pacing, in terms of the way the arcs play into each other. And obviously, we have to see the ending before we can really say that, but the nice compact length mixed with the character arcs here and what they have chosen to focus on and what they've chosen to tease, I really have enjoyed everything about this. So really looking forward to next week. I was hoping for another kind of cliffhanger for episode 8. I was hoping for something that would really tease what's going to happen in 9 and 10. We kind of got that with Crimson Dawn. It's just not on the level of who was Marrok talking to last week, because we figured Crimson Dawn was going to be a part of the story at some point. But I did really enjoy what we had and what we got, and I can't wait for episodes 9 and 10. Can't wait to talk about them next week. Sonic, do you want to finish any of your thoughts before we turn it over to questions? Because I know we cut out there for a second.
Yeah, I mean, I think you answered or at least explained a lot of my own similar thoughts there, but I think there were some things that we also heard about in interviews and all about how this would be seeing another side of Maul and all. And I wasn't entirely shocked by like the scene, like you brought up the scene where he like says, "I hate you," and then it goes back to his reflection. And then there's like the second one where he's like, "I'm sorry, I won't let this happen to anybody ever again," right? Like the great moments there. I mean, everything about Maul, he is a master strategist, you know, he has been a powerful weapon. He's so malleable, he's so adaptable, but he's also somebody who can't to the people who can see right through him, like, he can't hide anything about himself, right? Like, he has so many tells. I think one of the biggest tells that had always, like, not irked me, but it just kept on, like, bugging me, like, why is it constructed like this at the start of the show was, why are we only seeing 2 Night brothers, right? And they're always kinda masked up and all this and that. And then obviously we get the payoff here, right? With the yellow skin Zabrak who goes to like save Maul, gets stabbed through the back, very similarly to Savage, going up against Palpatine. And then you see his brother that yeah, is holding that knife, and he's like, "Oh my god, this guy." Like he bleeds his emotions. Like he even manifested his own version of himself in Savage and what that would have been like if they were still together, still fighting. And for me, the only small criticism I have that is I wish we had like some moments with them instead of just like silently like staring at each other whenever they're in the room together. And I don't know. I thought that was a really smart storytelling choice. You're always kind of questioning why this specifically. Why do they look like that? And then you're like, oh well, of course, because now we're gonna go through it. I mean, even when he's going through the tunnel, the sand, is it metaphorical? Is it like a sign of Tatooine and his destiny that that's where it all almost kinda really started, and that's where it's gonna end, like, just just such good, nice little details. I would have loved if they had, like, managed to just throw in, like, a little clip of Dooku and him fighting from Son of Dathomir, and that's the only reference we got, like, I want all these shows that have a chance to continue to build off of those stories that were part of Clone Wars legacy to at least adapt cool scenes and key moments at least, just like what how we saw with Asajj's revival in Tales of the Underworld and seeing the ending of Dark Disciple be represented in a very different light. So I'm liking everything. Like you're saying, I'm not seeing necessarily anything that's like this is all time classic, but this is extremely consistent. Extremely consistent. It's so assured, like you're saying. It's very confident about what it's putting out there. This is the most confident season of Star Wars animation. And when we started all the way back then, yeah, you could say you had Obi-Wan and Anakin, but it's 3D animation and it was not looking as good as this. And then when we moved on to Rebels, it's a whole new thing. It's a Disney era, lower age rating, right? And then you go to Resistance and you're trying to try stuff with the sequels, and then you go bounce back to Bad Batch after you get the chance to do Clone Wars. It's like, was animation ever going to really reach the heights and acclaim again and the technical proficiency in some ways of O3 Clone Wars under Gendy? And we'd always been like plugging away at it. And this is the first time it feels like there's no like doubt in or like worry or like any like, oh, like I'm not sure if this is gonna land sort of feelings from the writing and the animation and all like even that whole chase sequence kind of going for like almost like a crash punk, almost like Nile like music and making it both scene music and score music, and then combining it into the action sequence of Doki launching up the speeder into the gunship, like, and insane how they pulled that off. Like these are people who have studied what they're looking at and taken inspiration, just like Filoni has, and arguably has taken it to a different level. When sometimes he's a bit restrictive, he's a little bit too on the nose with his references in the Star Wars media that he does. So big fan of how it's all played out so far. I agree with Devon. She is just not falling for it. She's like an Anakin if there was some temperament. She has a lot of the same qualities there. I can see how appealing that is for Amal, especially if he's been paranoid. He's been having dreams and visions and hearing about the hero with no fear before his disappearance, right? And seeing something like that manifest here when someone who's a very technically proficient fighter and yet still is able to keep him at bay, like of course, he's even more tempted than ever before, but is he gonna really get any of that if he's gonna still be befuddled and thinking, "Oh, like, what's my I'm just gonna take back things and go things to the way they were?" No, it's that moment of clarity once he realizes, like, whatever I do next, good or bad, I'm gonna make sure another one of me doesn't happen, and knowing that there's no way he can truly make it like a good thing with Devon, that it's going to be twisted in its own dark ways with his own traumas, his own flaws, his own darkness. Just the potency of all that, right? Knowing that he's rediscovered who he's going to be and now has another ladder to potentially climb with the bailout of Crimson Dawn kind of appearing back in the picture here.
Yeah, it remains really interesting. And it is something that you don't necessarily think about Maul being a motivation for Maul, but the way he still sees himself as this kid who's under the thumb of Sidious. I mean, I think it's one of the more interesting angles the show has taken. I haven't expected that specific angle for the show, but it is fascinating, and a lot of you seem to be really interested in a lot of things they've been doing, and I really appreciate the way they've done this storytelling in here. It's very mature. I wish more people were watching this show because I think this show deserves that 6 p.m. slot. It just makes no sense. Why not put every show out at that time? It's not like you have to pay more for it or something. You own the streaming service already. It would be awesome if everybody was able to really look forward to the show every week, but it does seem like a lot of people are late to the party, but we can't wait to talk to all of you who are into Maul Shadow Lord. So we're going to turn it over to your questions for the rest of the stream. We've gone for about almost 30 minutes so far, so another hour or so of questions. So make sure you're sending in your thoughts, anything you'd like to ask or say about Maul Shadow Lord, send it in to the chat. We will take all of your guys' questions, as many as we can in the next hour or so, ending around an hour and a half for this show. All right, starting with Brandon Tran, who says, do you think where Maul sees flashbacks of his past, like Savage's death to Sidious, if Mother Talzin's death by Grievous from Son of Dathomir was added, would it look more tragic? Although a lot of us Star Wars fans know Talzin's connection to Maul, it's not necessarily as prevalent to audiences as Savage is. Savage is the face of Maul's personal and familial relationships in the Clone Wars. And so I think focusing on Savage and focusing on Maul himself without, having to throw in too many other things in that was probably the smart move. It would have been cool to see her in general, but I think if the show wants to just give a general idea to audiences who haven't watched Clone Wars, like this is the type of stuff this guy's gone through, I don't think they need to really have shown everything. More so, just show people the things that really hit Maul. And I think the death of Savage is what Maul's hinting at already when he talks about Palpatine at the end of or beginning of episode 7, when Devon asks, "Is your master still alive?" And he says that he was discarded by Palpatine, but it's not the worst thing he's ever done to him. And in my head, I was thinking he was talking about killing Savage was the main thing that he was focusing on with that, but it probably was a combination of all of it. Would I love to see Talzin? Sure, but I don't know if I would have said it would make it any more or less tragic in that specific scene than it already was.
I think Talzin also is a little bit complicated because we already have the appearance of her in season 6, and that's where people are gonna really be like, "Oh, she's back with Sword of Talzin," and then of all people, Mace Windu and Jar Jar Binks are involved in that kind of return, right? So it's a bit of a weird thing. Again, her true return, death of sorts, happens again permanently, supposedly in the Son of Dathomir comics, which again, I do want to see scenes of, right? Like I think it wouldn't have hurt putting it in there, but does it make much sense in like how the relationships and the wounds of those relationships that were reforged and then broken even worse after the Clone Wars for him would really like turn out here. I don't know. Like he would have if we're gonna get these two Night Brothers that really are younger versions and visual representations of Maul and Savage, and that's what almost triggers all that for him and how in his reflections there, then I think we would have needed to have like a Dathomiri Night Sister or something as part of the crew. And I would love, love, love to see something like that happen here. Absolutely with Maul, because we've seen how cool that is in Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor with Marin joining with a Jedi and Cal and Seer. Like it, there is so much potential, especially with somebody who has real history and connection to his Zabrak culture and how he's kind of been intertwined again with it, just like how Saj was, just like a Savage was, right? I would love to see a little bit more of that, and we know that he does to some degree fall more into that because he has that really weird shrine in Rebels where and the whole possession of the Ghost Crew that happens at that point. He's not somebody I think would necessarily shrink away from it. So maybe that's the space where he can fill in if Devon doesn't turn in this season, but is like, just closes the door on him a little bit, sort of like Rey on Kylo in episode 8. I think it would be pretty interesting to almost have and be like, "All right, fine. I'm tired of wasting time here," and then find some sort of night sister that he can, band up with and has a chance to try something there and then realize it's not gonna really work that way because I'm myself, I'm not a true Dathomiri, even like my brother was, even like Asajj was. Like I've been so stripped away intentionally, again, by Palpatine, and that has hurt me and shaped me and molded me and disconnected me from all the things that I could have returned to more fully. And the chances that I did have to return ended up in absolute devastation for my people, for my mother, and everything else. So would it have been better? Maybe a little bit more, but I don't think there was a lot in the storytelling and the visual cues so far in the season to really justify the tells and stuff in my mind.
Yeah, I think Dathomir and its connection overall to this show is going to be something that's going to be interesting to see as we go throughout the whole thing, because we know in Solo, Maul says he's on Dathomir, but when we see Dathomir in Jedi Fallen Order, which takes place 4 years, I think, before the main part of Solo, there's not really much of Maul to be found there, or really anything to hint at Maul's dominance over the planet, or like he's using it as his main base for his criminal operations. So it's going to be interesting to see what his relation with the planet is. Does he ever establish a base there? Is it just that's where he is in Solo? And he's like, that's where I hang out sometimes every once in a while. Or he went to visit a grave that he set up for his mom and for Savage or something. Like there's there's a million reasons he could be there, but they set it up in Solo as almost this that's his place. That's where he lives. That's where he rules everything from. But yet other things we've seen around the same time on Dathomir, he's not really involved. So I'm interested to see, because he's obviously been back there to recruit these Night Brothers. I'm interested to see if it becomes a central piece of future seasons of this show, and if they actually follow up on some of those threads from Solo, and maybe what we see in Fallen Order is just somewhere else, not really like involved, where wherever Maul sets up his base, he sets it up in a different area. But hypothetically, during Fallen Order, it would kind of be the peak of when Maul's in charge of the criminal underworld. So I would imagine the timelines might not sync perfectly, but we'd have to headcanon around that, because I think Maul is going to be definitely going to Dathomir at some point in this show, especially if it goes on past 2 seasons. Brandon says, will we possibly see Darth Vader or Palpatine himself face off Maul in the final 2 episodes? Yeah, that's the big thing that we've been talking about for 2 weeks now. I think Vader is the far more likely, especially for a duel. I don't know if I'd want to see Maul fight Vader right now, because Maul seems so tattered and broken with, like, physically, with his legs, with all of that. I think I would rather see Maul fight Vader when they're at full strength. But what I could see is Vader showing up, them having a brief fight, a little bit of conversation about Palpatine, about their connections as apprentice to Palpatine, and then it really teases more conflicts between the two of them in season 2, where we probably get a much healthier Maul, a much more powerful Maul in terms of his resources, and where we also can see Vader possibly go to toe with Maul multiple times over that season. So if I had to guess, it's going to be Vader if there's an actual conflict. I could see Palpatine, though, on the flip side, somehow getting in contact with Maul or coming face to face quickly with him. We just don't often in the Dark Times see Palpatine do anything. He's mostly somebody who tells everybody else what to do. Maul is a little bit different of a problem for him. It is personal. It's not just a big deadly threat. It's something that he would probably want to take care of on his own. And since he already failed to end it before in the Clone Wars, maybe it's something he sees as a loose end that he's wanted to close for a long time. So it's possible, but I just think Palpatine's too powerful, and we know neither one of them will die in that confrontation, but we know that Maul's injured right now. I just don't necessarily see Palpatine having a duel with Maul. But I could see both Vader and Palpatine show up in this episode, but I think one of them will be in episode 9 and 10. My bet would be on Vader for more of the action and more of the physical role, but you could see Vader even reporting to Palpatine by the end of the episode as well.
I think the complication of Vader in this part of the timeline is that it's still so early that he's probably still at this point kind of going through the Charles Soule comics. He's kind of going through his own thing. There is the whole Master Evil book out. There's gonna be moments for him that he's exploring more of his Anakin like sensibilities and falling back into that. But for the most part, he's just a monster. He's a killing machine. He's a weapon to be directed against, the most troublesome of pests for Palpatine. That being said, I don't know if like we can't see some variety of Vader. I think what would be very interesting is to play Vader off as more like we see him against Cal and how we see him against Kanan and Ezra in the season 2 opener Rebels. Just pure power, right? Like just an unstoppable force, an immovable object, and I just I again, I've been saying this from the start. I want Maul to come to some sort of weird freak realization that he's not just against some powerful dark side user, but it's also Palpatine's chosen apprentice, and it is the chosen one that he was seeking out in season 7. That still to me is one of the most curious decisions, hanging threads really out there about why you kind of change his character into more of like a bit of a paranoid freak in season 7 when he returns. Obviously, things have happened that makes him traumatized, but to make him like almost manifest his like worries and his troubles and his dreams and desires into the visions seems like a logical step. But again, most people have not seen or read Son of Dathomir to really get that, and that's not something that that comic really ends with and implies like, oh, this is what his next steps are going to be. It is a different thread to that character that is a lot closer to Rebels, but even Rebels doesn't really go to that sort of level there or like that strangeness or that vague feeling that consumes him, right? So I look at it as like there's a chance for him to make that realization, and then he's like, "Nope, I have my chance to escape. I'm gonna have to abandon Devon, or Devon has come along with me, or something like that." And that'll be good enough for him at that point because he's like, "Yeah, I'm not right now." Like I think in this moment, as much as he's like spent most of episode 8 being like, "Woe is me, Palpatine made me into this, all this and that," right? He's like, I think seeing Vader could be like a moment where he's comes to another realization of like it could be so much worse. It could be so much worse for him, and that he's not any slouch when it comes to like misery in the Star Wars galaxy, without a doubt. But I think he could see something that he'd be one of the first people who'd be like, oh my god, this is like terrifying and disturbing. He almost has his own sort of like moment, like Obi-Wan, like you're more machine now than man, right? Like just that feeling of like witnessing him once again. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that come full circle. Do we see any sort of lightsaber fight? I'm not saying that's not out of the question. I just think that it's going to be extremely limited and it's going to be more of like Vader just being like, I'm so done with you. I'm not supposed to be here right now. You're supposed to have been dead multiple times. You killed my original plan master, right? You caused so much between me and Obi-Wan, right? You got dragged away my apprentice to be killed off on Mandalore or wherever you guys crash landed afterwards, right? Like he has many a reason, even if he is Vader, to just want this man to be eradicated. In some ways, more than Palpatine, right? So I'd love to just see him be a terror and Maul just being like, okay, I have Crimson Dawn. Here's my escape parachute. Let me take it. And then the fear just hits him. He's like, oh God, this is much worse. I'll never be able to escape this. I'll have to one day confront this. And that's why I need Devon or whoever steps into that mantle next to him.
Next, we have Permafrost, Texas, who says, turns out Maul has been practicing his Sith corkscrew maneuvers all along. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're the apprentice to Palpatine, chances are you've seen that maneuver every so often. Maybe Palpatine did it against him. I would imagine Palpatine wouldn't reveal the secrets of how to do something as amazing as that. But Maul is probably, we know how jealous Maul gets. He's probably been practicing that for 20 years now, 20, 30 years, and he's still trying to perfect it. But he does a pretty decent job in this episode.
Yeah, he has a little bit of a drill action. It's enough to keep him away from all the detection of the Empire, so I guess it worked.
Brandon says, who could possibly be killed off in Maul episodes 9 and 10 for the epic finale between Officer Lawson, Two Boots, or Marrok? Well, I think my money would be on Two Boots. I think Two Boots is gone. I think he's going to die for sure. Lawson, I think, is too big of a character now for the show to kill off in season 1. I think the show is setting up, you know, something beyond for Lawson. He's a detective, but he's had many other lives prior to being a detective. And I think he's going to serve some other purpose, whether it's working for Maul, whether it's, he and Doki being on one side and Devon being on another side with Maul, or the three of them escape, four of them with Rylee. I think Rylee, to me, has a little higher chance of dying than I would say Brender. It's an animated show. I'm not sure if they would go that far to kill the kid character, but I think his character means so much to Lawson. What would his death mean for not just Lawson, but Lawson's feelings towards the Jedi, Lawson's feelings towards the Empire? We know he doesn't like the Empire. He seems to be okay with the Jedi. 7 and 8 kind of pull back on him blaming the Jedi for the Empire being after him. Maybe he put it into perspective that Marrok showed up at his house, and whether the Jedi were there or not, he was going to be captured by Marrok. So maybe he kind of put 2 and 2 together there. But in episodes 5 and 6, he really blames the Jedi for what's happening to him and his son. So it's going to be interesting if Rylee did die. How would he react and where would he go from there? I'm not predicting that, but I think Rylee is on the table if we're going to list all of those people. I think the other one you have to list is Doki. I think Doki is somebody who I didn't think was going to make it this far from the trailers. As the show has gone on, I grew more and more confident that Doki was going to make it to the end of the season at least. But I wouldn't be shocked if, even though this show has avoided the typical cliches we see for pushing somebody to the dark side, I wouldn't be shocked if Doki's death, even if it doesn't push Devon to joining Maul, let's say like as his Sith apprentice, it could push her to join Maul as, I'm not your apprentice, but I'm going to join you because you're the lesser of the two evils and you're my way off this planet. I could see that. And she's in her head thinking, "Oh, I'm strong enough, I'm good enough that I'm not going to turn to the dark side." But really, as season 2 goes on, we'll start to see it. I think those are the characters I would put on there. I just don't see Brender dying. Maybe he could. I mean, I'm not saying 0%. I'd give him like a 10%, but I think Doki I'm going to give a lot higher. Two Boots I'm going to give like a 75%, and Rylee I would give like a 15% maybe. I would say Doki I would say is at least 30% chance, I think, for me.
I don't know. It's who's gonna survive. I mean, this will be a bold, right? But I'd love for. Okay, maybe I wouldn't love it, but I could totally see the show with how mature it's all been to almost like rip away our expectations around Devon by having her be like maimed or like killed, and have Doki be the one to survive. Like, and that's how his story would fade away. Like, what else is there for him to do if his apprentice is not alive anymore? And I just I to in my mind, like, does that really make sense at this point? I think until episode 7 and 8, I would've been like, "Nah, no way," but 7 and 8 really showed off Devon really being on top of things. She really is checking on Riley. She is regretful about some of her actions. She does still have the fire and the spunk of, like, Anakin in Attack of the Clones, but there isn't anything about her that's, like, slipped or, like, taken a step like, she's edged it a little bit, like, I'm not saying she hasn't, but her way of edging closer to Maul is almost being like, "I'm gonna go help Brander because I messed up with Riley," and her master's like, "We should just abandon the planet," right? So we're not at that point yet, honestly. We're really not at that point of me thinking that she could completely fall to the dark side or, like, make a significant choice towards the dark side. So if you have her go up in a fight and then dies, like, that would be pretty shocking, like, if she is taken out by an Inquisitor or the arrival of Vader, right? And you leave the door open, I think, too, for why Maul feels a little bit more confident going after someone like an Ezra much later on in Rebels when Vader's eye is not as targeted towards him and he has been away from the majority of action, and there are other sproutling Jedi like Kanan and Ezra who have the attention of the much more weakened and older Inquisitorius at this point. You'd also leave a lot of space for why Maul is so willing to train Akira at this point, right? Like we've always been talking about Darth Talons. Are we setting her up for something past Maul to carry his legacy and continue into the sequel era and the post sequel era? Could be. I'm not saying we still can't be with Devon, but I think we are, we have to now consider with just how the show has played out. Like, is there really gonna be like a 5 year like cat and mouse sort of game between Maul and Devon before she finally becomes a Talon, or is this just like a false flag that we've been all so enticed by because of the history of Star Wars? So that is something I do wonder. I won't say it's very high, but for me, that's where I would put the like the 20% chance for Devon. I think Doki is closer to 60, 70. I mean, the show has, for the most part, avoided the standard Star Wars sort of tropes. I think the only like really obvious trope that happened in the last episode was more of like Two Boots being like, "No, I have to do the right thing. Protocols are not like this. Doesn't make any sense anymore." And he comes into action, kind of has his K2SO moment, shooting up all the TK troopers and all that. So yeah, I mean, I think Two Boots could die as well. I think Two Boots, Daki, those 2 seem like pretty pretty good options for dying. I think Daki in Inquisitorius fight, he still is holding his chest area. He still is a little bit hurt and wounded, right? Uh, that stuff is all kinda there. So I can see all that happening still where, like, you play that traditional role and then you can have Two Boots make like a sacrificial play and have a moment with Brander before Brander has to reinvent himself and continue forward. I think at this point though, I would with Brander, there's no way he dies. There's a way that he could slip further into the darkness, kind of go back to being the bounty hunter and, maybe make Riley feel like he's torn between two worlds, one of his father and one of his mother. His mother is a representation for the Empire, but he's now seen the darkness that the Empire really has, and she can't like skirt her way around it. But at the same time, now we also have this issue of like if Rena's dead from the explosion of the ship, and if he sees Two Boots die, and maybe like he just kind of is done with all of it and cracks, and he sees his father make like some darker choices and go crazy. Like who knows which way he wants to go? He might just want to like run away from it all. So I could see Brander absolutely being alive, but I do think that he's not gonna be the Brander that we have of season 1 where he's been straddling the line and he's a family man and all that. I think we could see some darker twists and turns for him. I mean, is this also the chance to really talk about Marrok and the 11th brother slash Crow? I do hope that one of them dies, right? I do think Marrok should die. I think in some sort of confrontation of a 3v2 with Maul, with Daki, and with Devon, one of the Inquisitors has to be knocked out. I think Marrok should have that opportunity in a weird, strange way because he's done so much in this season that has made him feel like a more of a top tier Inquisitor than just a nobody this whole time. But then there's a whole question of, like, the Crow, right? Like, what is the Crow Inquisitor really gonna be doing here without having a moment himself or themselves, right? Especially when we know that in, like, a less than a year or so in Tales of the Jedi, they go up against Ahsoka and instantly get just destroyed, right? So and not only are they destroyed, like, their whole body deflates and there's no gas or anything like Night Sister magic of Marrok keeping up some sort of version of Marrok or keeping him alive in some way, right? There I don't know. I feel like it could be a chance for both of them to die, and it just happens to be that Marrok gets revived later, and then the Crow is the one who has some other way of living or some biology allows him to live or get away with something. But I don't know. I think one of the two Inquisitors dead for sure. I think Devon, if you really want to do a crazy rug pull and you're not trying to make this a 3 or 4 season show and you're trying to make Maul be more desperate with Akira, more desperate with an Ezra. Brander, definitely not, obviously. But who else? I don't know. Just two boots and Daki. Those really feel like the traditional Star Wars takes and key choices to do as killing off. But if there's anybody to really, really die that I think would be just right enough for this season, it would just be Daki, and then you could still have two boots and a reprogrammed or like a slightly darker version of two boots, like in the comics of Shadow Mall, kind of go back into bounty hunting ways with the Brander, and how does that affect the whole family dynamic and everything, and that could be a great exploration. But I hate to say it, for the show that's avoided so many tropes, I really do think it's just gonna be the Inquisitors and Daki at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think Marrok, I think is the one that makes the most sense because of the possible connections to the Night Sisters and Dathomir. Maybe that doesn't. Maybe that makes it not that. Maybe that makes it so he won't die in season one. Maybe he goes to Dathomir and fights Maul, and he dies there. And because his remains are there, somehow Morgan Elsbeth or somebody else in the Night Sisters is able to bring him back for the time of Ahsoka. I think with Daki, I was gonna say like 100% chance at the beginning of the season, but the way this show has gone, I think the slow fall of Devon can lead to so many other plot points for Daki that he could be useful for even in this season. Let's say there's even something like Devon and Daki are fighting off the Inquisitors, and in some way, the only way for Lawson and Rylee to escape is for Daki to escape with them somehow and kind of protect them. And he leaves Devon. He abandons her. He doesn't necessarily have to die for that same kind of impact to be on her, where she ends up with Maul. He ends up on another side of the galaxy. And then by the time they reunite in season two, she's a different person or she feels that abandonment. We've seen him in this show. He's very loyal and protective of Devon, but we've seen him suggest or straight up make decisions that seem very cold in the traditional sense of the Jedi, where they're on paper the right thing to do, possibly, but from a human standpoint, don't necessarily seem like something you would do if you cared about another person. And so I think the only other scenario in which he doesn't die to me is that they're separated and it's just kind of a sense of impossible abandonment by him to Devon. And I think that could play in a similar way as him dying. Now, him dying, depending on who he gets killed by, can empower Devon in multiple ways. She could feel like she needs to become more powerful like Maul to defeat the Inquisitors, to defeat the Empire because they took her master from her. And I think that's the more likely outcome. But there are some other ways you can mess around with Devon's emotions via her master that I'm not 100% convinced with Daki. I think he's become a very valuable part of the show when at first it seemed like he was set up just to be that character who dies to push Devon towards the dark side. So interesting stuff there. I'm looking forward to seeing what they have going for us. By the way, we have a poll going in the chat, which allows you to vote on what you thought of Maul Shadow Lord episodes 7 through 8. So right now, 69% of people said it's great. 31% of people said it's good. Nobody's saying average or bad. That has continued to be the trend with Maul Shadow Lord. We have seen very, very few votes for average. I don't think we've seen a single one across all 4 of our streams for bad. I think we've seen maybe 1 or 2 across the 4 streams for average. So everybody seems fairly happy with this show, whether you think it's an amazing show or you think it's just a really good show. People across the board are enjoying Maul Shadow Lord, and I'm happy to see that because I feel very similarly. I don't think the show yet, and again, it's only, 8 tenths through season 1, but I don't think this show has done anything to me to be like amongst my top 10 favorite Star Wars things ever or my top 12 favorite Star Wars things ever. But it's done enough to where I think the show, with a promising finale, could have a run where it's actually one of the best Star Wars animated things or otherwise we've seen. And that wasn't necessarily something I immediately thought was possible when we were building up to this. I thought it could be very formulaic, very basic, but have the backbone of a very cool, beloved character. The show has decided to tell its story in a way that's far more compelling than they really had to get people to watch it. So I'm glad they went the extra mile with this show. And it seems to be showing across the board with people who are enjoying it. Next question is Tyler, who says, I need a real Cyclops visor. Good luck with that. I'm sure they sell replicas somewhere. You can get one. Permafrost says, was this the first time we see that Palps took Maul as a child and not an infant like in Plagueis? I was going with that origin, so I was caught off guard with that flashback. So that comes from, and I know this mostly because I just did a video about this on my other channel where I did a guide for every story Maul's in. If you want to check that out, you can see and what you have to read and play and all that to consume the whole Maul story. But this comes from the Myths and Fables collection, which you would be forgiven if you read that and didn't read the story, because it's not just the Myths and Fables collection, it's the Galaxy's Edge exclusive Myths and Fables print, which had the exclusive short story, which featured the canon telling of how Palpatine gets Maul. And Maul is this age in that story. So it is true to what canon has set up. Now, the only thing I'll say about that is that Myths and Fables is kind of one of those series that is supposed to be based on myths and stories and fables and legends that are told within the Star Wars universe itself. So, like, when you're reading it, you're supposed to be a Star Wars character who picked this up and is reading about possible things that could have happened in the Star Wars galaxy. So the way it's set up is that if something retcons it, they don't necessarily have to be canon, but if you are looking at Star Wars source books or Star Wars guides or even Wikipedia, most things will treat it as canon from myths and fables and dark legends and all those things until it's retconned. So right now, yes, that is where that story comes from. And Maul is the age we see him in this show, or just about. And he is a little bit older. The Legends version, like you were saying, he's an infant and he's just given to Palpatine. So yeah, I mean I like both. They're both pretty good, but I would say I prefer the Legends version. I just kind of like the idea of Maul being trained by Palpatine from birth to be this weapon and just completely subjugated under Palpatine's, you know, teachings and way he just initiates him into this cult basically of the Sith. And then after Maul's defeated, there's no help from Palpatine. He's just left there. And I think it impacts the feeling of abandonment even more so than his canon origin story, where he's abandoned multiple times, basically, and sent off and sent away, and not really ever found a home. I think the idea of him feeling like he possibly has a home, feeling like he kind of has a family in Palpatine, and then just completely abandoned when he's defeated can hit him harder. But they're both solid stories, and the canon version connects far more with the Night Brothers and with the lore from the Clone Wars. So if you want to check that out, that's where you would find it. I'm sure it's available online somewhere, and I'm sure it's available in ebook form. But yeah, it kind of does suck that a story that cool is exclusive to the Galaxy's Edge only version of Myths and Fables, which I'm pretty sure is not printed anymore.
Yeah, I mean, like Liam said, I think it kind of comes down to your preference of like if he's always been consumed by Palpatine or if he's had like the canon version where he does have a family that he stepped away from, been abandoned by, and like the complications as a child thinking that is it really my choice and all. And I think there was a little bit more emphasis on that of Savage, young Savage being like, what have you done? This is you aren't being yourself and all that. So I think at least Maul convincing himself through that vision, through his trauma being relived, he's convinced himself that like not only did my family not just hand me away, but like there's something he did too to make it so that they would do that and they would let me go. And yet even after all that, my family did try and find me and they did and they helped me out. So it's like you can play whichever works. I think obviously he wasn't Dathomirian before, neither was Asajj Ventress, and then they both became Dathomiri, right? So that consolidation might not be to everyone's like a cup of tea for if you're someone who like was reading the 2003 multimedia Clone Wars project and had read like the Infinities version of Maul's return against Obi-Wan and all. Like, sure, I understand that, but I guess for me, I've been so pleased with something that should not have worked for Maul, should not have worked with for Savage, should not have worked with Asajj Ventress, and yet all three of them I think are better in my mind because of the Dathomiri background and just the layers that have been added. And this show is just further proof that even if he's never truly gonna be good, he almost finds some twisted solace and reasons for who he is and what he's become, because memory is a fickle thing, and if you're adding in the Force and someone shocking your body alive, like, every 3 minutes because you can't do a proper lightsaber strike and all that, like, it's gonna do a number to you no matter how strong and powerful you are. So I do like it, but like Liam said, the fact that it's in a Galaxy's Edge exclusive printed version, like, yeah, that's rough, buddy.
Yeah, you just don't understand why they do that and don't have like a later reprint version that's like everything here. I've been waiting for them honestly to do kind of like a what we would have called it like an old omnibus version where you have basically all the myths and fables, dark legends, myths and fables, the Christmas special myths and fables, like all of those in one book. But I don't think they've done that yet, which is kind of crazy because I've read a lot of that stuff, but I haven't read all of it, and it's been a while. And everybody swears by how good that is. And the stuff I've read, I really have loved. And so it is a really solid short story collection for especially for canon, which doesn't really have very good short story collections and hasn't had very many short story collections. Basically, all we have are from a certain point of view, which has been pretty solid. But the goal of those is less to tell, short stories and more to show different sides of the movies themselves. Like we haven't gotten stuff like Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina or Tales from Jabba's Palace. So it would be cool to have what little stuff we have in Myths and Fables really out there for people to consume. But those releases all kind of came out around COVID as well. And they kind of flew under the radar and people just didn't read them. And then having different short stories scattered across different versions. I'm not a fan of when they do that because it's cool to be able to choose your cover or something from different places, but to actually have content that's not available in other versions, that doesn't necessarily make much sense. So hopefully we will see them collect all of that somewhere. But I'm sure it's online somewhere, like maybe ebook version. You might be able to buy it or something for just each short story. That's what they used to do in Legends was when they had short story collections, you could buy specific short stories. You didn't have to even buy the whole book. So we'll see what they do. But yeah, if you want to check it out, it's there. And also check out that video. It is a good video and has a lot of good information if you're interested in Maul. Next up is Brandon, who said, I would score both of these episodes easily as a 10 out of 10 experience. The tone reminds me of darker episodes of the Clone Wars, like the 501st versus Krell arc on Umbara, or Clone Wars conspiracy or Clone Conspiracy arc with fives. No, so yeah, I don't know if I'd go as high as you for 10 out of 10, but I would say these episodes for me and the show as a whole has been a solid like 7.5 to even 8 in its peak. I would say these episodes have been 8 to 9 for me. And overall, the show has been close to an 8 for me out of 10, like a 4 out of 5. I think this has been a really good show so far. I like this season as much as pretty much anything I've seen from Disney Plus animation. Now, the reason I'm holding back mostly on a score is because we've seen so many Disney Plus Star Wars shows and so many Disney Plus shows in general just absolutely bomb on the finale. So I'm a little more confident because they've done better with shows that are getting a season 2, but I'm still never 100% confident on Disney Plus finales. So we'll see how season 1 ends. I'm pretty hopeful. I think they've got a lot there, but we will see. So I won't commit fully to a score until next week.
Yeah, I agree of it feeling like a 4 out of 5, especially in the last 4 to 5 episodes. I think the one problem I do have with it is that we haven't had a, like, moment that captures the zeitgeist, right? Like, if you're gonna save that for a Vader Maul fight, sure, cool, but that's the one issue that I have with everything being so serialized in shows in general. TV doesn't have to be that way, right? You should be able to pick it up here and there. And then if you need to catch up with the story, sure. But that's why I love the Clone Wars with its arcs format. I just don't understand why we haven't had an arcs format like that since Rebels without some of those like filler episodes. Like we could have had an interesting arc with just Brander and everything with Rena and everything on Janix, and then have Devon and Maul poke into the picture. Then we could have had a very Devon focused arc. Then we could have had a very Maul focused arc. Like we could have done all that, but this is a show called Maul's Shadow Lords. You're like, okay, sure, he's gonna have maybe he has a full through line, but then why does everybody else have to like stick around with that? That's my, I guess that's my one issue with it, unfortunately. But I'm not saying it's bad. I guess I'm just a little, like Liam said, a little burned out on the finales of shows like this that have been serialized that feel like they suddenly have to be padded or patched together or just rush things to, or just feel a little like soft of a landing when they should have been like, oh yes, we've been making such great big moments happen, and then we saved the best for last, right? Animation in general still been pretty good about that. I'm still like a pretty decent defender of um Bad Batch season 2 and everything as well in that sense. And that's probably like the worst offender, if you could really say that. Maybe that or no, probably Tales of the Empire. Probably that's probably the biggest offender of like not using its format as purely as it could have been. But I like this show. I'm just waiting for the thing that makes me go like, "Guys, go watch the show." Everybody had, like, a lot of hype coming into this, and I think people will watch the show and be like, "That was a really strong show." But I don't wanna be telling people, "Go watch a really strong show. Go watch the show because this, and this happened." At the end of the day, this is a pop culture franchise. I'm hoping for pop culture moments in all of my Star Wars media when it comes, and right now, it's been so mature that I'm like, "Hey, just loosen up the cork a little bit, like, let something out, like, let us have something that goes a little viral here and there. There's nothing about that so far, and, maybe that's they're saving it all for, like, every single scene in Mandalorian Grogu or something, but I think Maul as a character should have had a little bit more kick, so that's why maybe I place it more around, like, a 7 to 8 range. Everything technically on paper is there. The soul is there, maturity is there, the intrigue is there. I'm just waiting for the thing that makes me go like, "Aha, here I can point to that as a reason to watch the show for just any normal newbie or someone who's just only seen Clone Wars." I can't say that Maul is more exciting to me right now than he has been since season 7. I can say that he's a much deeper and richer character, but that's always gonna be a harder sell, especially in animation versus like an HBO live action show. But I'm glad for you, Brandon, that it is touching those arcs. Those are some very untouchable arcs for me right now in all of Star Wars animation and a lot of Star Wars storytelling in general. But I'm glad that there are fans of the show that feel like it's already reaching those highs.
And then, Brandon, for your non Star Wars questions, we're going to keep it mostly Star Wars focused here until we at least finish all the questions for the night. So we'll come back to those if we have some time. If not, save those and bring them a week after next for our next live Q&A. And we're going to keep these Maul focused for right now. Anthony says, sorry I'm late. The thing that struck me the most was Maul's pledge to never let another child slash person be manipulated and dominated by Sidious. I'll bet the Inquisitors helped with that. Yeah, that was a great moment. It really was. That whole scene, that whole sequence was really strong. And I think the thing that really takes it over the top from just your basic kind of character introspective scene is that it told us new things about a character we already know a lot about, and it told us new things about his psyche and the way he thinks. We've seen Maul from so many perspectives, but never his perspective. And this was the time where we really got to get under his skin. Even the two books that are about Maul mostly treat him as a badass and don't necessarily get into his mind. And they both take place before the Phantom Menace. Even all his comic series, they all take place before the Phantom Menace. Everything about him is before the Phantom Menace. So when he becomes a more layered character after the Phantom Menace, it's all from other people's perspective. He's either the villain, he's either this crazy guy, he's this guy you can't trust. Here you get to really understand him. And I thought that moment and the moments we see for him, especially at the end of episode 7 when the Night Brother dies and through episode 8, were essential for this character to have a real personal arc in this show. He's had some arcs in terms of his growth as a leader, his growth as a manipulator and a strategist, as a master throughout this show so far, but this was the first time we got to see him personally, what drives him. And I really did appreciate that. So completely agree with you, Anthony. It was a great moment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of that. It's that new clarity and purpose that he's had after kind of trying to going back to something that he had left behind in season 5 and season 7 of Clone Wars, and whatever has happened since then. He got his revenge very quickly. It was the first episode, pretty much, first two that he like locked down everything that he needed to, and then you're like, okay, what comes next? And I don't think even he had planned that fully. Like you see with the Mandalorians that are not as loyal to him and Rook when they steal the ship, they're immediately bombed. So I mean, that would have happened to all of them. Like I think this also shows that as good as he is, he's not quite there yet, right? He needs to still operate a little less on the front lines, and he's so used to being that guy that he can pull the strings, and then when it really has to come to it, he's still that guy. He's still so dominant. But I think one already having a bit of a damaged knee. That Chekhov's gun was a fake flare last episode, last two episodes. This time it fully went off, and he gets his hip kind of cut off too. Going through all of that and then seeing his forces be destroyed, seeing the stand-in for Savage be killed, it's like saving him and giving him a breather, right? Yeah, I mean, I think it all should tell him that, like, right now, because of your obsession with Devon, you've let just these like skeletons of a foundation fall apart. And it's because even all of that, you weren't really taking care of or nurturing in the way that you should have. Right. You were here, you got your revenge, and then you didn't think what was next because Devon took over for you. And you were letting paranoia and force visions and all that guide you, as opposed to just thinking about what do I need, what do I want, and that clarity that he has of like, I don't want anybody to ever go through what I did. I think will be a very interesting way to like retroactively look at his old master persona, look at how he becomes the Shadow Lord that is above Crimson Dawn, that is such a powerful influence, but so mysterious and away from everybody. throughout his reign as with Crimson Dawn, right? There's again an empty period that has so much complexity that we're probably never going to even touch till 4 or 5 years down the line. But it is nice to know that now this character or this version of him, even if there's still a lot more to go to like clarify that direction and vision for him, it's seemingly he's come back to thinking about what does Maul need and what does that really like lead him into next.
Next up, we have Permafrost, who says the old man persona wouldn't really work at this moment because Devon and Doki are already familiar with who Maul is rather than Ezra so far removed. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it doesn't necessarily work as well, but I think Maul is somebody who, since they expect him to be evil, expect him to be really aggressive and Sith like, him using that persona can still at least assuage their fears and make them second guess their preconceptions, especially when you're dealing with Jedi, when you're dealing with good guys. Those types of characters want everybody to be good. They want to see the best in people. And I think that type of thing could at least allow them to lower their barriers to prove that he's not necessarily the person that they thought he was, even if he's done some bad things in the past. The Jedi, at least the good ones, are very open to second chances. And so I think you would see that, but I think his actions and his the things he's done, not least of which he's killed quite a few Jedi, including Qui-Gon Jinn, who Daki might have known. I think his actions will be are bad enough to where they'll never truly remove their suspicions from Maul, but at least the old master persona could kind of create a little bit of an air of maybe he's not as bad as he was, which will allow them to drop their guard. So it won't work fully to convince them or to seduce Devon to the dark side like it might have for Ezra, but I think it's something we are going to see him kind of starting to mess with here, that kindliness, and we've seen it throughout the show so far.
Definitely. I mean, there's some discussions later on about like what comes next, like with the dark side cults and all that. Like, how does that filter in? And we've seen a Vader explore that recently a lot more as through since his comics in 2015 onwards. We've seen that with Palpatine throughout his history, especially in canon. It's it's not too far of a stretch to think that Maul has, in some ways, been more focused on like again being a weapon and then making extensions of himself as a weapon, right? He Luke treats the Shadow Collective as that. He takes over Mandalore, and it's probably the most martial focused society out there in Star Wars. Like he's good at that stuff, but he needs to take that next step to actually learn to like play his cards, to like take some small but patient losses to then go to the next step because he's actually figured out something with the force or found some artifact or something. He needs that level. And that's that level that I feel like he does have by the old master persona in uh Rebels, but it's just that he's happens to be still remain that Sisyphus character, and he has lost all the martial aspect of his character other than like big bursts, right? Like he's to make an NBA representation, he's like LeBron right now. He's 41. Like it's crazy what he's doing, but in that fourth game, he was missing every shot because they played 48 minutes of overtime in the game before less than 48 hours later. Sure, in his prime, that would have been nothing, right? Same as Maul. Like he could have just gone right back up and would have been fine. But Maul is a pretty old dude by the time he comes to Rebels. And I know Star Wars recently has really been pushing the whole thing of like all these alien species and humanoid species live even longer than we expected. But I don't see him with half a body and with all that force lightning and all the darkness coursing through his veins and the continuous losses that he's someone that can just get back up. Like he's not in like 24/7 recovery after like, oh, we beat a syndicate, now I get to go back to studying. Like that's not the type of dude he is. He doesn't have the time or opportunity. He's gonna continue to face more and more challenges even as he grows with the empire having more and more of a stranglehold. But can that persona actually have an interesting predecessor or a version that might be alluring to a Devon, that might be something that actually helps him in his rise in Crimson Dawn or take over Crimson Dawn or whatever it might be. Yes, I think there's plenty of space for that, but he needs to start looking more toward the esoteric and less towards the just like raw power that he was always kind of dependent on.
Anthony next says, I'd love to know what Maul thinks of the recent dark side cults existing in the galaxy. Wonder what he even thinks or knows about past dark side groups like the Path of the Open Hand slash the Nameless. I'm not sure. I think that would be an interesting question, especially because when under Palpatine, I would imagine he didn't get out much. He didn't learn much about other dark side groups besides the Sith. But so, like, what has he taught himself in the last few years? What has he taught himself over his research and descent into maybe other powers that the Sith didn't have or didn't teach him? I would imagine Maul at this point, he obviously hates the Sith. We hear him say that in the Clone Wars, but he still operates everything as if he was a Sith. He wants an apprentice. Like, those things are important to him. Those small traditions. He just doesn't necessarily align with the full beliefs of Palpatine. I think that's really his hang up with the Sith, is not necessarily his hate for the dogma or the religion itself, but the hate for the guy who's the face of it right now, and that's Palpatine. So um, I think it would be interesting to find out what else he learned about all of these other groups when it comes to specifically Path of the Open Hand or the Nameless. The Nameless are something that obviously will have their place in history. People will have known they existed, but nobody, or at least it's not widely known galaxy wide, how they ended or what happened to them, like we know if we've read, the High Republic. Path of the Open Hand, I don't know if they would ever really be called in like a history of Star Wars. If you were in the universe, like you read a historical text, I don't know if they'd be called a dark side group, probably more of a cult. But I think of, other groups we see lead into the sequels or the post Return of the Jedi timeline. You have Acolytes of Beyond, you have the Knights of Ren, you have the Sith Eternal, things like that, that what existed around this time and what it comes out of the remains and the remnants of Palpatine's death. We're still not really sure about all of those different things. So Maul could get locked in with some of that stuff, but I would imagine his loyalties mostly line with kind of the Sith ideas and the dark side magics of the Dathomiri that he's also loyal to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could be. I mean, he definitely. I could be finding something. I just don't know if until this moment of clarity of like this is my purpose moving forward. How I'm gonna achieve it is by finding more power, finding new ways, climbing new ladders. I don't think the mall that we see at the start of the show was like, oh, I found a couple holocrons and then I walked into a bunch of force cults and stuff like that. Like he might know some of these things, but I don't think history lessons were really Palpatine's way of seducing him, right? He's a kid. He was never meant to be someone like that's treated well, like a Dooku of some ways that who's actually been an active participant in a lot of things that have shaped and changed the galaxy prior to the prequels that Palpatine's been influencing with Plagueis and everything that happened before that. And Vader, he tells the whole like, "Have you heard the story of Darth Plagueis and all that?" Like he can play with that because he's playing with the whole idea of, "Oh, this is a solution that's hidden away here." What can he say here to Maul at this point at like as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old that's gonna be like, "Oh yeah, like this is really important for you to know." He's like, "You're gonna be a Sith, you're gonna be my weapon, and that's it. That's all you need to know, right? Just be very good at that, right?" If he was I don't we've never seen, like, Maul use, like, Force lightning or anything either, I don't think so, right? It's not like he's someone got he's got telekinesis, obviously, that seems like a pretty standard thing for any Force user other than, like, a Corran Horn or something, but he's not really ever really used the Force as anything other than an amplification tool of his raw strength and all. So for him to have seeked out that knowledge, at this point, no, I just don't see it. I think for him, it's just a matter of like he understands in a really strange, failed way, like um, society building, right? Like he thinks that he can create criminal empires that operate in modified ways of like what he was probably taught would be necessary for an empire that was led by two Sith. Like he's still, it's like somebody who's like, like still working off of like high school knowledge. He's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, like I remember that lesson and this is how I've changed and experiences that I can add on top of that." That's how I look at Maul right now. He's not somebody that's incompetent, but has he really sat down and learned? Not so much. I don't think so. So maybe after this, I think a season 2 could be a great starting point and leads us into that version that seemingly has a lot more of that in Rebels.
Next up, Anthony says, I think Dathomir will be saved for next season. I think you're right. I don't expect to see Dathomir in the finale unless it's just briefly like Maul arrives there at the very end of the show. I don't think we do anything significant there, but I do expect to see it, or at least hear it referenced at some point in this show. I think we will go there, especially because now one of the Night Brothers has died. Icarus, I believe, is the one that lived. So I'm trying to remember the other one's name. I think it was
Scorn.
yeah, Scorn. Started with an S. I knew it. Started with an S. But yeah, so he's died. Whatever Maul's connections to how he got these Night Brothers to join him, they might have been mercenaries on another planet. We don't know exactly if he went to Dathomir to pick them up, but I think we go back there at some point. I just don't know when, and I don't expect it to be. If it is this season, I don't expect it to be more than like the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes of the last episode, briefly setting up and teasing what could be there in the next season.
Yeah, again, Dathomir is going to be so important to Maul, but have we really spent time in other than his revival kind of dealing with that? Son of Dathomir definitely gets into it, but even that has so much other criminal warfare, has Dooku and Grievous in it. Like it shows another massacre by Grievous on Dathomir. Like stuff like that happens, but we haven't really seen the potential of Dathomir and its like death period. Like when it's the planet should be like very much dormant from its pretty big surge of activity pre Clone Wars and during the start of it, right? So I think there is, like you're saying, a lot of potential to pick it up from here. It's always kind of, I don't know if we've really seen any real stories about like knights. I mean, we have Morgan Elsbeth, but she doesn't really. She's not 100% pure Dathomiri. I think she's like a human that's adopted who's trained in that. If we're gonna go, if she is that little girl from the short story, but I would love for Maul to find something on Dathomir. I mean, if you're gonna introduce like the Singing Mountain Clan too, and everything in Tales of the Empire, like I want Maul, if he's gonna go to Dathomir, not to simply just retread old stuff. Like do it, but add some new things. Like what is it that like makes him sort of that kindlier version, or makes him much better of a manipulator, makes him a little bit more effective as a negotiator, like his old nemesis Obi-Wan, but for his own needs and purposes and desires. He can't just force his way into the room again and cut people down. Sure, he can quite physically do that if he's got functioning legs and all that. But nobody's gonna be like, oh yeah, let's get the Shadow Collector going for like a third time. Like it's really not gonna work at this point. So whatever has to come now is a reinvention, and I think Dathomir is a great place for a reinvention.
Next up, we have Mandalorians in 36, who says new favorite character besides Maul and Devon, Icarus. Yeah, Icarus had a good moment in these last couple episodes. Feel badly for him, but we'll get hopefully a little bit more character for Icarus moving into the last couple episodes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd like to hear discussions and talks between other Zabraks, but we just haven't had that really between, other than that one moment between Icarus and Scorn before Scorn goes off to like save Maul.
Next is Anthony, who says, is Darth Vader involved with Lord Momin at this point in the timeline? It's around 17 BBY, right? the same point when the Bad Batch ended. Wonder if Vader is searching for Sith artifacts after Master of Evil. So we still don't know exactly when the show takes place. I think 17 BBY seems to be about the time. I would say I'm pretty close to just saying it's 17 BBY at this point because of everything we've learned. One of the wrinkles from this week in terms of timeline is that Devon calls the TK troopers stormtroopers. So we actually have them being known galaxy wide as stormtroopers, even if they aren't wearing the classic stormtrooper armor. So we're still in that transition phase from clones to classic stormtroopers in visual design, Clone Wars era tech to Imperial tech, but we do have the galaxy calling them stormtroopers. It does seem like this is at least a year, if not more, after Revenge of the Sith. So there's a lot of things that lead us to believe that, and on top of the fact that the same people who ran the Bad Batch, it ended in 17 BBY or ended it at the end of 18 BBY. I think it is 17. I think they're just kind of inching their way through the dark times and telling stories, piggybacking off of each year. So I would imagine this is 17. I would imagine season 2 is 16. When it comes to Momin, I wasn't 100% sure, so I looked it up before I answer your question because I thought you were right. But the Momin arc of Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith actually takes place way later than the rest of the series. The rest of the series all takes place in 18 BBY and 19, end of 19. The Moment stuff all takes place in 12 BBY. So it's a huge time jump, 5-6 years away from where we are right now. It begins in 14 BBY, I think, the first issue, and then the rest of them take place in 12. So Vader, hypothetically, right now, wouldn't have any canonical stories that are really conflicting with him appearing in this show. And even if he did, we just saw Master of Evil tell a gigantic book story in between a couple issues of the comics. So like there's room to mess around with Vader and like tell Vader stories, even if other parts of the timeline have Vader stories. He can apparently be in more than one place at a time and doing multiple different things. He's very good at multitasking, I guess, at this point in the timeline. So I would like to see him in the show still. It would be cool if he was still hunting for Sith artifacts. I mean, I think at this point he's less rogue than he is later in the Dark Times. He's still kind of under Sidious's thumb, still bowing to whatever Sidious demands of him. We still see that a little bit in Master of Evil, even though he does have a little bit of agency, but it's still within the confines of what Sidious is asking him to do. So, yeah, I don't know if I see him having his own personal mission to find Sith artifacts unless it pertains to resurrecting Padme, which has kind of been his overall goal at this time period, to continue to find a way to bring her back to life.
Yeah, I mean, like Liam said, the timeline thing is what makes it a little difficult for all these things to kind of line up. I guess you could say Vader is searching for Sith artifacts. This is also like complicated, but the fact that we also have to take into consideration the whole timeline once Moment creates um his whole like castle that Vader is also like, I'm ready to now start diving into figuring out everything with Corvus and like the backstory of Mustafar and making sure I can like use a strange force deity power linked to the planet to revive Padme, right? So it's, is he using Sith only artifacts? Not necessarily, but I think he can find things that are dark side related or just esoteric, and he is using that. But there's only like a certain level to what he's gonna really be able to do and achieve, I think, with any of these things, because obviously he's still kind of used like how Maul is, just a little bit more refined and a little bit more brutal in terms of just he's just a weapon for Palpatine. By the time A New Hope comes around, he's subservient to Grand Moff Tarkin, right? Like he's not like top dog like he is in Empire Strikes Back, like leading a whole fleet, right? Like That's what I love about the 2015 Vader comics. They show a really, really strong rise to power and him claiming it for himself. And yeah, that knowledge and all that stuff is good for him, but it's like how we've always heard it be discussed. The dark side is a cancer. Like it seems like you might be feeling a little bit better with treatment and all that, but unless you really target the root of it, it keeps on growing, keeps on taking over you. So diving into more dark side stuff to make him more powerful and yet also service that Anakin that still lingers in him, especially in the first half of the Dark Times, it's not going to be very successful. As anything, I think he just chews out whatever's left behind, and then by the time he has the confrontation with Obi-Wan and everything, and then he's kind of forced to like set it aside. Whatever remains of Vader is kind of extinguished there, and then the next back half of the Dark Times really just becomes like, hey, you are the killing machine. You are an instrument of the Empire. You do what the Moffs say. You do what Palpatine says. You go where needed. And does that really leave space for, like, a lot of, like, all this experimentation that he does earlier on as Vader? I don't think so. I think he's just become Vader at that point. He's no longer having these, like, momentary slides back to that Anakin. At that point, Anakin's becomes like a persona that he slips into, and then by the time we get to A New Hope, it's like an ember, like a barely alive. So, yeah, I don't know if I would say he is past moment, but who knows? You can always fill in stories. It's just I don't know how effective like these artifact hunts like really turn out to be.
Next up, we have Mandalorians, who says, "Who you got? Axe Woves versus Rookcast or Koska Reeves versus Rookcast?" I think I would take Rook in both fights. I think she's
Yeah.
more formally trained. She's been trained under Maul or under his stewardship, so that's a little bit of a wrinkle of probably more brutality or more viciousness than the other two would have experienced. I would take her, I think, in both fights. I assume you're meaning fights. I would take her in both fights, I think.
Yeah, that's a tough one actually. I'd say she absolutely dominates Casca because Casca is just some young upstart, right? And, talking trash to Boba. Even if Boba's not in his prime, Boba's still Boba. But I think Axe Woes, we saw him have a bit of a fight with Bo-Katan. Even if Bo-Katan herself is not quite in her prime, she's not too far away from it either. She's quite young. If anything, I think she should be younger than Rook is at this point in the timeline. So, uh, it's tough if she's going kind of back and forth with Axe, and she's not really trying to kill him. Versus a Rook would probably be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna really try to kill you," right? I don't know. I think it's a lot closer. I think it's like 6 out of 10 times Rook wins, but I could see Axe with the way he fought against Bo-Katan and the sort of leadership and trust that was placed into him in all the other Mandalorians and not necessarily in Casca right after they abandoned Bo-Katan post season 2 of Mandalorian. I think that means that, you know, there's a gap for those two with Casca, but Rook is it's any kind of given day. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point with Bo-Katan. I just also I don't think Bo-Katan's really that strong at that point. It just the show doesn't really portray her as that
Not really.
elite of a fighter still. So
Yeah.
we'll see. It's also just like the weakest fight between Mandalorians in the whole show, which is just more of a thing about season 3 than anything. But I would feel like Bo-Katan, it just depends on how old she is in Clone Wars, because that's like 20 years after Clone Wars, that fight.
Yeah.
So I feel like she's in her 50s or something, but it depends how old she is in the Clone Wars. It's the whole timeline's weird. She looks the same in everything. So who knows? Next up, we have, I believe, Silent Arc, who says Kamal helped the Rockets recover from a 1-3 deficit in the
No.
playoffs.
No, and no. Job
I
is
don't
gonna
think
be
anything can
finished.
help them.
Job is going to be finished. I don't care if Katie comes back. No,
I don't think anything can help them. They're a mess. The
they're a mess.
Rockets.
They got lucky last game because, yeah, okay, they had some decent strategy, but they went to overtime with the third option on the Lakers leading the way, missing everything after his first shot until he checked himself out, making his second shot in the fourth quarter. Like it's is a fluke game. It's desperation. Any team that's down 3-0 usually wins it, especially if they're at home because they have to. Like there's no choice, right? So if they had won, game 3, which they should have, they screwed up. They then yeah, you make all your arguments, but no, no. Even a Darth Maul won't make any difference here, and I think Darth Maul, Redskin as he is, would be with the Rockets, and that whole team is a toxic mess, and Maul is not going to make it any better.
Yeah, I don't think anything can help them. I haven't been watching much of the NBA playoffs. My team's out, but the Rockets have been a mess all year. And I'd like to say the downfall started with the Warriors beating them last year, which should have been faster than they ended up beating them. But they have no chemistry, so we'll see what happens this offseason. Anthony says, I wonder if Palpatine wants to know the location of Sophros. I meant in terms of dark side cults like the Brotherhood and the Ninth Door. And to talk about Sophros, I'm sure he wants to know the location. He wants to know everything. Like I'm sure it's something interesting to him. I wonder if there's like notes of past Supreme Chancellors or something that only Supreme Chancellors can see, like secret files that possibly could have the location. But I also don't know if he really cared too much about going there and possibly dying from the Nameless. So, yeah, it's kind of an interesting conundrum because Palpatine wants to be in charge of everything. I'm sure he would love to know. And if he found out the history of it, I'm sure he would be interested in using it. But it also could backfire on him as a Force user. So I don't know if he would necessarily enlist the help of like the Nameless in the future or try to re-implement that plan. But he would, I'm sure, be fascinated to at least know how he could use an extra weapon, especially a weapon that deadly, if he so needed to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're bringing up all these like really interesting Force cults and ideas. I don't think a Sith gives a deal, right? It's like cool, but that failed. Like Palpatine's like, I'm gonna take what's needed, but clearly it didn't work out then. So why should I care about it? And some of that is the arrogance of the Sith too, right? Like not thinking that you can learn from others and all. But Palpatine's not super foolish either. He probably takes just what's needed and then discards the rest. And I don't think there's frankly much there for him to be like, oh yeah, like if he goes to Planet X, he puts himself in danger. Like, why would you do that? And like, maybe they're still alive, keeping the balance, right? But if he interrupts the balance, it kind of causes problems for an empire if you're trying to have every planet under subjugation when it's all falling apart because of gray matter particles just eating up the citizens and then infrastructure and everything. So why ruin that for himself? And probably at that point it's healed, to be fair.
Next up is Mrs. Mandarin, who says, up late watching on the East Coast, enjoying the show, very entertaining. Paintings and pictures, voice actors, animation, great. I love it. Also love it's not all predictable. They made the Inquisitors threatening. Maul reminds me of a criminal who was severely abused as a child. After Maul used his powers to make the stones come down, I was thinking, why didn't he just do that on the bridge? Well, I'm glad you're really enjoying the show. And I'm glad you're joining us tonight and you were able to make it for our stream. So appreciate all of your thoughts. I agree with pretty much everything you're saying about the show. I think visually, this is Lucasfilm continues to just make this animation style look better and better, more and more fluid, quicker and faster, more textured, and everything just looks better every single year. So I love all the things they've done to continue to push the boundaries of this animation style. They're committed to it, and I'm glad they're not just committed to reusing it over and over again. They're committed to making it better every single time they do use it. So agree with all of that. I'm glad they made the Inquisitors threatening as well. I'm glad Maul was still able to defeat them. As for the rocks coming down on the bridge, he could have, I guess, done that, but it doesn't seem like where the bridge was doesn't necessarily seem like they're surrounded by cave rocks like above his head because there's ships flying down into it, right? So if there's ships flying into that area, I don't know if there's rocks above his head. Could he have like picked rocks up from the side and thrown them at different ships? Maybe. but I think he does it purely out of a moment of desperation. I don't think it's something that he would normally do. We don't necessarily see Maul as somebody who's consistently using the force and force powers for offense. He's very much so more of a physical hand-to-hand combat type of fighter than he is somebody who uses the force a lot in combat. So I don't know if it would be necessarily the first thing that comes to his mind, but maybe this will be the start of seeing him grow as a force user and grow more powerful as a force user within combat. I just think the scene itself where he brings the rocks down is more out of desperation than anything.
Yeah, typically when you build bridges, you don't want to have like a whole landscape that could collapse on it, even if it's minor, right? I think that's kind of the issue there with the whole design is that yes, it's carved in some sort of valley of sorts, but it's also like very remote and it's not well maintained. It seems pretty automated for the most part, and that's why they're able to use it. But you don't just build something like that and also leave it at risk. If it's an open landing platform with no guardrails, a Star Wars classic, it should mean that it should have a space for people to land on or make quick deployments on. So anything above, no. If you mean more of like, why didn't you use the force to like break up the bridge itself? I guess. I mean, it's like saying, why didn't you just like if he, like, takes away, like, the main centerpiece of the arch of a bridge or something and then all of it collapses, he would be fine, he could jump away, we know he can't die right now, but can his Mandalorians do that? Can his Night Brothers do that? Like, it's not like he can predict everything about the collapse. Even the collapse on the cave on himself, the episode in episode 7 ends with him like staring at them, and then 8 opens up with them like with him actually running out and jumping and diving in desperation, doing like the Palpatine spin to drill his way back into safety, right? Like that could have easily backfired on him. So I get that, but I think you have to understand at least how it comes off to me. That was a move of desperation, right? It was, and especially one that was triggered by them saying like Palpatine wants your hide, like, and he's like, so do I, right? Like, I think that's especially after seeing Icarus die and all that, like, yeah, or Scorn die, you're like, yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense why he would be like just willing to do whatever it takes to just survive in that moment or go down with them. And then he sees that small glimpse and he takes it. So I don't know if Maul is really someone who strategically brings down bridges and buildings like that. I think it was just a choice he had to make because there really wasn't anything, and the opportunity opened up in the chaos.
Next is Dale Skywalker says the show parallels Bad Batch from what I understand. Yeah, I think like I don't really have much of an answer. I wish I did. I know I make all the timelines. I'm usually the timeline guy, but I've done all my research. I've done as much research as I can and watched these episodes multiple times. There's no real clear indications for anything. It's just kind of, hey, it's in the dark times and it's the early dark times. There are people who have been consistently arguing with me that this takes place in 13, 12, 10 BBY. And I really just don't understand how you can think that. I'm not saying you, Dale. I know you're saying around Bad Batch, so 18, 17. I think 17 is probably pretty accurate. That would align with Bad Batch season 3. That would align with either concurrently or right after Bad Batch season 3. And we know a lot of the visuals, technology, the military hardware, the design of the stormtroopers, all of it is the same. So I would agree with you that I think this could take place simultaneously with the Bad Batch. It could also take place like a week after the Bad Batch season 3, and we won't really know until they really clarify it. I think an appearance of Palpatine would also help clarify it. So if he does show up next week, we could see. Next up is Erlen Dale. Dale and Mrs. Mandarin were talking about Crimson Dawn. Yeah, it's the exciting tease for next week. I'm excited to see Dryden Voss and see all of that
Absolutely.
come together. I'm interested. That'll also provide a little bit of clarity on timeline. Is Maul still in charge of Crimson Dawn? What's their connection overall to Maul? How prominent are they in the galaxy? What happened to them after the Shadow Collective arc? Why were they not at the Siege of Mandalore? Why were they, you know, appearing in a hologram right before Siege of Mandalore and then seemingly kind of abandon him. What's the connection to everything and how is it all crossover? I think that's going to be also a pretty big key for where exactly this takes place in the timeline.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Paul Bettany's coming back to play, or at least voice act. I think that really is the big question. I mean, he's also an alien species, so we're not really sure how he ages per se. He's humanoid, but that doesn't mean anything these days. So, I don't know. It's tough. I was trying to look up. I mean, even the model that they used for Dryden Voss is technically not a Dryden Voss model in season 7. Just like a quick glimpse to insinuate that, but it could have easily been somebody else too. But I don't know. I'm of the opinion that Maul is has to somewhat start again. I think his current structure is failing him because he was trying to go back to making something work from what he thought was a skeleton, but was more like ashes. So now that he has a little bit of clarity, I think he will find a way to like slot himself in, bide his time, build his power, try new things out, and then either take over for Dryden, partnership with Dryden, and betrayal. Like there's so many ways. Get him back to how he was when he started the Shadow Collective and play on the assumptions of everybody, but then go about it a whole different way. And I think that's a great way to make it work out. But yeah, I don't think Dryden is coming to be like, "Oh, I owe you one, boss." It's like, "No, I'm bailing you out. What can you do for me?"
Yeah, as it goes. You probably heard about the Pikes and was like, I don't want to be on this guy's bad side, but also this might be a chance to really become the definitive syndicate with the Pikes weakened. Whatever happened to Black Sun at this time, maybe Crimson Dawn sees this as an opportunity to really come in and take control. And I think that's probably just what they're doing. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left or so in the stream tonight, everybody. So we'll try to get through the last couple questions. But if we don't, make sure you either save them for next week, you comment on the replay, and we'll try to answer them via text, or you send in a super chat, and we will answer any questions super chat before the end of the stream. Next up, Anthony, YouTube fan, says, guys, I'm wondering when the upcoming Hiding from the Darkness novel takes place. Please tell me that Cybot Galactica is going to be seen in animation live action. So for Hiding in the Dark from the Darkness, we know it takes place in the Dark Times at some point, and I believe Dale followed up with that because Darth Vader's on the cover, and then I believe the author also revealed that Darth Vader is going to be hunting these kids in the story. So it has to take place sometime before New Hope. That's what is being said. I'm hoping it's great. I've been excited for a Star Wars horror novel. It's been a while. We haven't gotten one since Red Harvest, which I think was like 2012 or 2011. So it's been a minute since we've had a Star Wars horror story. And I've really been excited for this. I wish it was not YA, but we will see. We've had some great YA books. Hopefully they do a good job.
Is it even
Yeah. So,
YA? I thought it was actually middle school or something.
oh, is it middle school? That's
It
even
might
worse.
be. Yeah, let me I did see it's set between somewhere between 19 uh BBY and 4 and BBY or 4 ABY or whatever or 4 yeah, I'm just like, "Great, that says nothing to me.
So
That says
basically, yeah,
useless."
from the birth of Darth Vader to the death of Darth
Yeah, right,
Vader.
like, I do think the art is fantastic though, like, it's nice to see something
Yeah, it
that
is.
just
It's good.
is just rich and actually plays into genre feeling of it all. Yeah, it's a horror themed middle school grade novel. Kirsten White, she did the Kenobi one. I thought that was decent, but not so much story, more of the character work there. Ooh, I don't know. It could be something. It could be something interesting. It just we'll see. It's a I don't know. We've seen good middle school novels from
Yeah.
uh, High Republic, and it seems like YA as a whole has just kind of died out. But does that mean that we're gonna reach the peaks of High Republic? I don't know. I don't think Kirsten White was the best of those books that year when we had Brotherhood and Shadow of the Sith. So, um, yeah, we'll see what she's got up her sleeve.
Yeah, all I could say is that it's going to be probably the first middle non High Republic middle grade book that I'm interested in checking out on drop day in a long time, since like early canon when they were doing a lot of tie-ins to the movies that were coming out. Because I was reading like Guardians of the Wills and stuff all when they were coming out, but recently middle grade stuff hasn't really interested me without it being High Republic. So I will definitely be interested in checking this out, but it stinks that it's not like a full adult novel. I really wish it was a full adult novel. Maybe we'll get one, but I doubt it. Okay, so we're about to wrap it up here. I guess our final question of the night. Mandalorian, who says, when Rook says there's no sign of Lord Maul, I wish that was the end, and that's when she breaks off from Maul and becomes the armorer. That would be peak. Yeah, I'm still not 100% convinced on that theory that she's the armorer. I would say I'm not even 50% convinced on that theory. I think it's plausible, but I don't know what specifically about Rook's story so far and like the things that she's involved with would lead me to believe that she would become one of the central figures of a cult where Mandalorians can't take off their helmets, and also uh, creates this whole kind of medieval style creed, and the way they talk is so different from the way Rook talks in this. I don't know. I think it's just like that's the dramatic character change. Something, not saying something traumatic couldn't happen to her, and she falls back on, oh, I wish I stuck to my, Mandalorian roots instead of following Maul. I wish I became, a real Death Watch member. I want to go back to those like Mandalorian roots from the old Republic and from beyond, and embrace those teachings and embrace the customs of my ancestors. And I'm going to form this whole cult and become a leader of it. And she could do that, but I just don't necessarily see where in her story right now that she shifts so dramatically in both perspective, both customs, and the way she acts and the way she is to suddenly becoming the armorer. But never say never. But I would say I'm like 10% on that, if even 10, maybe even less.
I was at like a 10% to start the show, and then kind of jumped up to like 15, 20, and now it's 0, especially after the conversation that she has with Maul about like when they're like traveling, and she's like talking back to him. She's like, what is this? Like, you can't be keep on doing all this stuff for the girl. Like, I followed you, but like these guys are mercenaries. We see how that plays out. The only way it would happen is like if we had like a whole arc for her, which again, this is not a show that seems to be very arc focused, and she goes to Mandalore and she dips in the living waters, and she goes back to the original ways, and we see a whole flashback of who she was. There's just too much. She's a supporting character. I think it's fair to say that the armor could have been someone who was maybe part of like the Maldalorians at one point, but was probably like a super young follower who was like, wait, this is crazy. What am I doing? And then skimped away, right? Like as opposed to someone who's like so entrenched and working with a dark side user.
Yeah, I think so too. I just think that because Death Watch and Maul had a similar, that they conjoined at one point, it's very likely that Maul's influence was on the remnants of the Death Watch, which possibly became the Children of the Watch, which became, what the armor was one of the leaders of, and so on and so forth. But I don't necessarily buy that Rook is the one that carries that on. I think it's somebody within the remnants of the Death Watch who survive after Siege of Mandalore and who decided to not just revive Death Watch, but go a step further and revive some of the ancient customs of the Mandalorians. That's going to finish it up for our stream tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about Maul Shadow Lord. Make sure you come back. Next week is the finale of season 1 of the show. So make sure you come back, bring your questions, bring your theories, bring your thoughts. We're going to have a lot to discuss. And it's also going to be May 4th. So we're going to be celebrating Star Wars as a whole. We're going to be about 3 weeks from The Mandalorian and Grogu. So there's a great amount of Star Wars hype and great amount of excitement towards this franchise. So we can't wait to talk about Star Wars. and about Maul Shadow Lord with you all next week. So make sure you bring your questions. If you didn't get one answered tonight, bring it back next week. Bring some theories. We will be putting out our predictions video again this week. So lots more Maul Shadow Lord content coming for you all, even though this is the final 7-day stretch towards the end of season 1. Final vote tally, we had 78% say Maul Shadow Lord episodes 7 and 8 were great. 22% said good. Nobody said average or bad. So again, continuing that trend of love towards this show. We can't wait for the finale, and we can't wait to hopefully get some big surprises and exciting moments next week. Make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Thanks so much for watching the stream tonight, everybody. And we will see you all next week for the Maul Shadow Lord finale.